Every single week, 240 million people walk into a Walmart. Think about that for a second. That's almost 1 out of every 3 Americans. Every week. And yet, most of them have no idea how this happened. Because Walmart was never just a store. It's a machine, a system, something built quietly, patiently, to do one thing better than any company in human history. Make sure the people with the least money never have to pay the most for it. And here's the part that gets me every time I research this story. Walmart didn't start with money. It didn't start with investors or a glass office or a fancy plan. It started with one man in one small town asking one question that nobody else was asking. Why should poor families pay more just because they're poor? That question didn't just build a company. It rewired how an entire country shops. But stick with me, because the real story here isn't about cheap prices. It's about power. It's about decisions that quietly wiped out thousands of small businesses without anyone declaring war. So let's go back to where it actually began. 1962, Rogers, Arkansas, a tiny town. The kind of place big corporations didn't even bother looking at. Because back then, every retail company believed the same thing. Big cities, big money. Everyone else, ignore. But Sam Walton looked at the exact same map everyone else did and saw something completely different. He saw millions of families, hardworking, overlooked, paying more for basic goods. Not because they wanted to, because they had no other choice. And instead of chasing the cities everyone else was chasing, he made a quiet promise to the people nobody else cared about. If I give you the lowest price humanly possible, you will never have a reason to leave. No flashy branding, no luxury aisles, no gimmicks. Just value. Real, honest value. And for a struggling family in 1962, saving $4 on groceries wasn't nice to have. It was the difference between making it to Friday or not. But an idea on its own doesn't build an empire. What came next is what actually changed everything.
The secret nobody talks about. Everyone thinks Walmart won because it was cheap. That's not even close to the full story. The real weapon was something nobody bothered to notice. Not flashy, not exciting. Logistics and leverage. Other retailers were pouring money into ads, into pretty stores. Walmart was stuck on one boring question. How do you move a product faster and cheaper than literally anyone else on the planet? So they built trucks, warehouses, inventory systems so tight that competitors genuinely couldn't figure out what they were looking at. And that's when it got dangerous, because that machine started feeding itself. Lower costs leads to lower prices, leads to more customers, leads to more power, leads to even lower costs. And that power didn't stay small. It turned into leverage over the people who actually made the products, the suppliers. Think about it from their side. Walmart's on the phone asking for 1 million units. The shop down the street is asking for 1,000. Who do you think walks away with the better price? Right. So quietly, supplier after supplier started shaving their margins just to stay in the system. And the loop kicked off again, this time faster. More scale leads to better deals, leads to lower prices, leads to more customers, leads to more scale. Once that loop is moving, you're not competing on price anymore. You're trying to outbuild 30 years of infrastructure someone else assembled in silence. That's the real moment competitors started vanishing. Not because they ran bad businesses, not because they didn't fight hard enough, but because nobody wins a fight against 30 years of momentum. At some point, Walmart didn't just compete in retail anymore. It started setting the rules of retail. And that's the moment competitors began disappearing. Not because they were bad businesses, not because they didn't try. Small chains tried to match the prices. Some tried to copy the model piece by piece. But none of them had the one thing that made the whole system work in the first place: volume. Without that volume, you can't get the same discounts. Without the same discounts, you can't match the prices. And without matching prices, you can't keep the customers whose spending built that volume to begin with. It's a loop that locks itself shut from the outside. Once a retailer is large enough to negotiate from a position of real strength, every year that passes makes that position harder to challenge. The advantage doesn't reset, it compounds. That's the part people miss when they look back and just see low prices. Low prices were never the whole strategy. They were the visible result of something bigger happening behind the scenes. A retailer using its size to rewrite the terms suppliers and eventually entire industries had to operate by. By the time other retailers understood what was happening, it was already too late to copy it. You can't build decades of supplier relationships and a nationwide logistics network overnight. That's the real meaning behind the point of no return. It isn't one dramatic moment. It's the point where the gap between the leader and everyone else stops being something rivals can close through effort alone. You cannot outfight a system that has decades of compounding momentum behind it. And that's exactly why Walmart had already become something far harder to challenge than a store. It had become the system the rest of retail had to operate inside of.
Walmart wasn't built on luck or hype. It was built on a system that's hard to copy. If this kind of story hooks you like it hooks me, smash like, subscribe, and stick around. Because next time, we're cracking open another hidden empire quietly running your life. See you in the next one.